Hello, everyone, and welcome to No Shame English. This podcast is for people who want to speak English, but sometimes feel nervous, shy, or afraid of making mistakes. If you ever stopped yourself from speaking because you were worried about your grammar, your accent, or choosing the wrong word, you are in the right place.
We created this podcast because we know that feeling very well. Both of us learned English as a second language, and we still remember how uncomfortable it felt at the beginning. Sometimes you want to speak, but your mind freezes, your heart beats faster, and suddenly you feel like everyone is watching you.
But here is something very important that we want to say from the start. English is not only for perfect speakers, English is for communication, connection, and sharing ideas, and most people in the world speak English as a second or even third language.
In this podcast, we will talk honestly about our own experiences. We will share stories about embarrassing moments, funny mistakes, and situations where we felt insecure, and most importantly, we will talk about how we learned to feel more comfortable speaking English in real life.
I want to start with a very simple question. Why is speaking English so scary for many people, even when they understand the language quite well? In my experience, the fear does not come from English itself, it comes from the fear of being judged.
I completely agree. When I was learning English, I could read articles, watch movies, and understand conversations. But the moment someone asked me a question directly, my confidence disappeared. I was afraid of sounding stupid, slow, or incorrect.
I remember my first job where English was the main language. During meetings, I had ideas, but I stayed silent. I was thinking too much about my grammar instead of my message. Later, I realized that native speakers were not perfect either. They paused, corrected themselves, and sometimes used very simple sentences.
That realization was very important for me too. We often imagine that everyone else speaks perfect English, but that is not true. People forget words, change sentences in the middle, and make small mistakes all the time. The difference is that they do not stop speaking because of it.
Exactly, many learners believe that they must speak perfectly before they open their mouth. But fluency does not come before speaking, fluency comes because of speaking.
I also noticed that fear becomes stronger when we compare ourselves to others. We listen to someone who speaks very confidently and think, I will never speak like that. But we forget that this person probably practiced for many years.
And another important point is this: people usually care much less about our mistakes than we think. Most of the time, they are focused on understanding the message, not correcting our grammar.
I remember one very specific moment that changed my mindset. I was traveling and needed to ask for help at the airport. I knew my sentence was not perfect, but I spoke anyway. The person understood me immediately and helped me without any problem.
That is such an important experience. It shows that communication works even when language is not perfect. I had a similar moment when I ordered food in a restaurant and made a grammar mistake. The waiter smiled, understood me, and everything went smoothly.
After moments like these, you slowly start to trust yourself more. You realize that mistakes are not disasters, they are part of the learning process.
And honestly, mistakes can even be helpful. When you make a mistake and someone understands you, your confidence grows. When someone corrects you kindly, you learn something new.
This is why we want to say something very clearly. You are allowed to speak even if your English is not perfect. You are allowed to pause, think, and try again.
In the next parts of this podcast, we will talk more about real situations, work meetings, social conversations, asking questions, and dealing with embarrassment.
We want you to listen and feel relaxed. There is no pressure here, no judgment, and no rush, just real conversations about real learning experiences.
In the first part, we talked about fear and why speaking English feels stressful for many people. Now I want to talk about something very uncomfortable but also very important: embarrassing mistakes.
Yes, because no one likes to talk about them, but everyone has them. When I think about my English learning journey, the moments I remember most clearly are not the perfect conversations. They are the moments when I made mistakes and felt embarrassed.
And what is interesting is that these moments usually teach us the most. I still remember a situation at work when I wanted to say that a task was challenging, but instead I said it was confusing. The meeting became silent for a few seconds, and I immediately felt uncomfortable.
I know that feeling very well. Your face gets warm, your heart beats faster, and you start replaying the sentence in your head again and again. You think about how you should have said it differently.
Exactly, but what happened next surprised me. One of my colleagues asked a follow-up question, and the conversation continued normally. No one laughed, no one judged me, and no one even mentioned my mistake.
That is such an important lesson. We often think our mistakes are very big, but for other people, they are usually very small or not important at all.
I want to talk about another feeling that many learners experience, the feeling that everyone is watching you when you speak English.
Yes, especially in group situations, meetings, classrooms, or social gatherings can feel very stressful.
When I first spoke English in a group, I felt like all eyes were on me. I was thinking about my pronunciation, my grammar, and my accent at the same time. Because of that, I could not focus on what I actually wanted to say.
I experienced the same thing, but later, I realized something important. Most people are not watching us closely, they are listening, but they are also thinking about their own answers, their own worries, and their own mistakes.
This is something psychologists often talk about. We believe we are the center of attention, but in reality, everyone is the center of their own world.
And when you understand this, speaking becomes a little easier, you stop performing, and you start communicating. Let me share another story. I was once in a situation where I did not understand an explanation in English at all. I nodded and smiled, even though I was completely lost.
That is something many learners do. They pretend to understand because they are afraid to ask questions.
Exactly, but later, the situation became worse because I did not know what to do. Finally, I said, "Sorry, I don't understand. Can you explain it again more slowly?" And something interesting happened.
Let me guess, the person was kind and helpful.
Yes, they explained it again, used simpler words, and even thanked me for asking. At that moment, I realized that asking questions is not a weakness, it is a skill.
This is a very important message for English learners. You are allowed to ask questions. You are allowed to say, "I don't understand. Can you repeat that?" Or, "What does this word mean?"
And this is not only for learners. Native speakers do this all the time. They ask for clarification, repetition, and explanation.
Language is a shared responsibility. If communication is not clear, it is not only your fault.
When you ask questions, you show that you care about understanding, and most people appreciate that.
Another big source of embarrassment is accent. Many learners believe they must sound like native speakers.
But having an accent is normal. It means you speak more than one language.
I used to feel ashamed of my accent. I tried to hide it by speaking less, but that only slowed down my progress.
When I accepted my accent, everything changed. I focused on clarity instead of perfection. People understood me, and that was enough.
In this part, we talked about mistakes, embarrassment, and asking questions.
In the next part, we will talk about confidence, practice, and how small steps can make a big difference.
In the previous parts, we talked about fear, mistakes, and embarrassment. Now I want to talk about something very simple, but very powerful: practice.
Yes, because many people believe confidence comes first and speaking comes later, but in reality, it works the other way around. You start speaking first, even when you feel uncomfortable, and confidence slowly follows.
When I was learning English, I waited for the right moment to speak. I thought one day I would suddenly feel ready, but that day never came.
The same happened to me. I realized that feeling ready is not a requirement. Speaking before you feel ready is actually part of the learning process.
Exactly, confidence is not something you have, it is something you build, sentence by sentence.
Many learners think speaking English means having long, deep conversations, but confidence often starts with very small interactions.
Ordering coffee, saying hello to a colleague, asking a simple question at work, these moments may seem small, but they are very important.
I remember when I started practicing English through small talk. At first, it felt unnecessary and awkward, but over time, it became natural.
Small talk is not about saying something interesting, it is about keeping communication flowing.
And the good thing is, small talk uses simple language. You do not need advanced grammar or complex vocabulary.
This brings us to another important point: simple English is not bad English.
Many learners try to sound smart by using difficult words or long grammar structures, but this often makes speaking harder and more stressful.
When I stopped trying to sound impressive and started focusing on being clear, everything changed. My sentences became shorter, but my message became stronger.
Simple sentences are easier to say, easier to understand, and easier to remember. They help you stay calm while speaking.
And clarity builds confidence. When people understand you easily, you feel more relaxed and more willing to speak again.
Another challenge many learners face is translating every sentence in their head before speaking.
I used to do that all the time. I would think in my native language first, then translate into English, and by the time I was ready, the conversation had already moved on.
That process creates stress and silence. Instead of translating, it helps to think in simple English phrases.
You do not need perfect sentences, you just need enough words to express your idea.
Thinking in English takes time, but it starts with accepting simple language.
I remember a moment when I decided to stop correcting myself all the time. I was speaking, made a small grammar mistake, noticed it, and continued anyway.
That moment is very powerful. When you choose communication over perfection, you free yourself.
And interestingly, the conversation became smoother, I was more relaxed, and people responded more naturally.
This is because communication is about connection, not performance. People respond to your energy, not your grammar book. Another important thing is that practice does not need to be perfect or planned. You do not need a classroom or a teacher to practice speaking.
You can practice alone by speaking out loud, describing your day, or sharing your thoughts in English. You can practice with friends, colleagues, or even strangers.
Every time you choose to speak instead of staying silent, you are practicing, and every time you practice, you improve.
I want to be honest about something: fear does not completely disappear.
Yes, even after years of speaking English, you may still feel nervous sometimes.
But the difference is that fear no longer controls your actions, you speak anyway.
And that is real confidence, not the absence of fear, but the ability to move forward despite it.
In this part, we talked about practice, simple English, and small conversations.
In the next part, we will talk about comparing yourself to others and how to stop doing that.
There is one habit that silently destroys confidence more than grammar mistakes or pronunciation problems, and that habit is comparison. Many English learners listen to fluent speakers and immediately start judging themselves. They think that if they do not sound like that person, they should not speak at all. I did this for a very long time, and it stopped me from improving.
I relate to that so much. I remember listening to people who spoke English very fast and very confidently, and I felt smaller every time. Instead of feeling motivated, I felt discouraged. I started thinking that maybe I was not talented enough for languages, even though that was not true.
The problem with comparison is that we only see the final result. We do not see the years of practice, the mistakes, the awkward conversations, and the moments of self-doubt that person experienced. We compare our beginning or middle to someone else's advanced level, and that is never fair.
Exactly. Everyone's language journey is different. Some people start early, some start later, some people use English every day, some only sometimes. Comparing yourself to others ignores all of these differences.
Another important thing I learned is that fluency and confidence are not the same thing. Some people speak English very fluently, but they are still afraid of making mistakes. Others speak more slowly, but they communicate clearly and confidently.
Yes, confidence is not about speed. It is about being comfortable with who you are as a speaker. When I stopped trying to speak fast and focused on speaking clearly, I felt more in control.
I also noticed that listeners are usually patient. They do not need you to speak fast, they need you to be understandable.
And when you accept your natural speaking speed, your mind becomes calmer, you stop rushing, and your sentences become clearer.
Social media has also changed the way we see language learning. We see short videos of people speaking perfect English and think that is normal.
But those videos do not show the full picture. They do not show the pauses, the mistakes, or the practice behind the scenes.
When learners compare themselves to these videos, they feel pressure to be perfect all the time, but real communication is not like a video. It is messy, imperfect, and human.
Language learning is not a performance, it is a process.
One thing that helped me a lot was understanding that my English does not need to be special or impressive, it just needs to work.
Yes, you do not need fancy words to share your thoughts. Simple language can carry strong ideas.
When I stopped trying to sound intelligent and focused on being honest, my English became more natural. People connected with my ideas, not my vocabulary level.
And connection is the real goal of language. I want to share something personal. There was a time when I avoided speaking English because I felt behind others. I told myself that I needed more time, more study, and more preparation. but the truth was, I was afraid of being seen as imperfect. Once I accepted that imperfection is part of learning, everything became lighter. I started speaking more, making mistakes, and learning faster. That was the moment I truly moved forward.
For me, the turning point was realizing that English is not a competition. There is no finish line where you suddenly become good enough. There is only communication, learning, and progress. When I stopped measuring myself against others, I finally enjoyed speaking English.
In this part, we talked about comparison, confidence, and false expectations.
In the next part, we will talk about real-life conversations and how to stay calm when things do not go as planned. There is a moment every English learner knows very well. You start speaking, everything feels fine, and then suddenly your mind goes completely blank. You know what you want to say, but the words disappear. For a few seconds, silence feels very loud.
That moment can feel terrifying. Your thoughts start racing, and you begin to panic. You think that everyone is waiting, judging, and noticing your silence. Because of that pressure, it becomes even harder to find the right words.
I used to think that this moment meant I was bad at English, but later, I realized that this happens in every language, even in our native one. The difference is that in our own language, we stay calm and continue.
Exactly. The problem is not forgetting a word. The problem is the meaning we give to that moment. If we see it as failure, panic grows. If we see it as normal, we can continue. One of the most important skills I learned was how to pause without fear. Silence is not the enemy. It gives your brain time to breathe and organize thoughts.
Yes, pauses make you sound thoughtful, not weak. Native speakers pause all the time. They say, "Let me think, how can I say this?" or simply stop for a moment.
When I started allowing myself to pause, my stress level dropped, I stopped rushing, and my sentences became clearer.
And interestingly, listeners rarely feel uncomfortable during these pauses. They usually wait patiently. Forgetting words is very common, especially under pressure, but there are many ways to handle it without stopping the conversation.
You can explain the word using simple language. You can describe what you mean instead of searching for the perfect word.
For example, if you forget a word, you can say, "It's something you use for." Or "It's like." This keeps the conversation moving.
When I started doing this, I realized something important. Communication does not depend on perfect vocabulary. It depends on creativity and flexibility.
I remember a meeting where I completely forgot an important word. At first, I panicked internally, but then I decided to explain the idea in another way. The sentence was not perfect, but people understood me. After the meeting, one colleague told me that my explanation was very clear. That moment changed my mindset forever.
I had a similar experience in a social situation. I forgot a simple word that I had used many times before. Instead of stopping, I laughed softly and explained what I meant. The conversation continued naturally, and no one cared about the missing word. That was the moment I realized that confidence is not about knowing everything. It is about continuing even when things go wrong.
Panic is the real enemy of speaking. It tightens your chest, speeds up your thoughts, and blocks your memory.
That is why staying calm is more important than knowing more words. When you stay calm, your brain works better.
Simple breathing, slowing down, and accepting imperfection can change the whole experience.
When you accept that mistakes will happen, you stop fighting reality. You stop wasting energy on fear and use it for communication instead. In this part, we talked about mental blocks, pauses, and staying calm.
In the next part, we will talk about English at work and in professional situations. For many people, speaking English becomes much more stressful at work. There is pressure to sound professional, clear, and confident at the same time. Because of that, mistakes feel bigger and more serious.
Yes, work situations add another layer of fear. You are not only speaking a language, you are also representing your skills, your position, and sometimes your authority. That pressure can make even simple sentences feel difficult.
When I first worked in an English-speaking environment, I overprepared everything. I wrote sentences in my head, memorized them, and tried to say them perfectly. But when someone asked an unexpected question, everything fell apart.
That happens very often. Work conversations are dynamic. You cannot prepare for every possible question or response.
One thing that helped me a lot was changing how I saw meetings. Meetings are not language exams, they are problem-solving spaces.
Exactly, you are there because your ideas matter, not because your English is perfect.
When I started focusing on the content instead of the language, I felt less pressure. I spoke more naturally, even if my sentences were simple.
Simple and clear communication is often more professional than complex language. I remember my first presentation in English very clearly. I was extremely nervous and focused too much on grammar. Because of that, I sounded unnatural and stiff. Later, I realized that the audience cared more about understanding the message than hearing perfect English. In my next presentation, I spoke more slowly, used simpler sentences, and focused on clarity. The feedback was much better.
Emails are another source of stress. Many learners spend a lot of time writing and rewriting emails in English.
Yes, because written language feels permanent, you think people will judge every sentence.
But most professional emails are simple, they are short, clear, and direct.
Using simple structures is not unprofessional, it is efficient.
Another challenge at work is speaking up in meetings. Many people stay silent because they are afraid of saying something wrong.
But silence can be more harmful than a small mistake. When you speak, people see your involvement and interest.
Even short contributions can make a big difference. You do not need long speeches. At some point, I realized that confidence at work does not come from perfect English, it comes from consistency. The more I participated, the more comfortable I became. Mistakes did not disappear, but they stopped controlling me.
Professional communication is about respect, clarity, and cooperation, not perfection.
And when you understand that, work English becomes less stressful.
In the next part, we will talk about social situations and informal conversations.
How to relax, be yourself, and enjoy speaking English outside of work. Speaking English in social situations can sometimes feel even harder than speaking at work, because here you cannot hide behind professional roles or prepared topics. In social settings, people expect you to be natural, relaxed, and spontaneous, and that expectation can create a lot of pressure. I remember feeling that if I could not express my personality in English, then people would never really know who I was.
That feeling is very real. When you speak another language, you can feel like a smaller or quieter version of yourself. Your humor, your emotions, and your natural reactions may not come out easily. For a long time, I thought that meant something was wrong with me. But later I understood that this is a normal stage of language learning.
At first, I tried to copy the way other people spoke. I used phrases that did not feel natural to me because I thought that was how English should sound. But this only made me more uncomfortable. When I started using my own style, even with simple words, I felt more relaxed and more like myself.
Many people think small talk is useless or fake, but in reality, it is a social bridge. Small talk helps people feel comfortable with each other before deeper conversations happen. When I stopped judging small talk and started seeing it as a skill, it became easier.
Small talk does not require deep opinions or perfect language. It is about sharing simple moments, asking basic questions, and showing interest. Weather, food, travel, or daily life are all safe and easy topics.
And you do not need to talk all the time. Listening is also part of conversation. When you listen actively, you naturally find moments to respond. I remember one evening when I was at a social event and felt completely out of place. Everyone was speaking English, laughing, and joking, and I felt invisible. Instead of forcing myself to be funny or interesting, I decided to just be present. I asked simple questions, listened carefully, and responded honestly. Slowly, the conversation started to flow, and I felt included. That night taught me that connection does not come from impressive language, but from genuine interest.
For me, the turning point in social English was realizing that silence is not a failure. You do not need to fill every moment with words. When I allowed myself to be quiet sometimes, I felt less pressure. People did not see me as boring, they saw me as calm and thoughtful. That changed how I approached conversations completely.
Being yourself in English does not mean speaking perfectly. It means expressing your values, your thoughts, and your emotions in the best way you can at that moment. Over time, your personality naturally finds its place in the language.
And that process cannot be rushed. Just like in your native language, confidence grows through experience, not effort.
Social confidence builds through repeated exposure. Every conversation, even short ones, teaches you something.
And each positive experience slowly replaces fear with familiarity.
In the final part, we will talk about mindset and how to keep going when learning feels slow.
How to be patient with yourself and enjoy the journey. When people talk about learning English, they often focus on speed, how fast you can speak, how quickly you can improve, how soon you can sound fluent, but in my experience, the most important skill in language learning is patience. Without patience, even motivation slowly disappears.
I agree completely. There were many moments in my journey when I felt stuck. I was studying, listening, and speaking, but I did not feel any big improvement. That feeling can be very frustrating, especially when you expect clear results.
What helped me was understanding that progress in language learning is not always visible. Sometimes you are improving, but you cannot feel it yet. Your brain is connecting patterns quietly in the background.
Yes, learning a language is not a straight line. Some days you feel confident and fluent, other days, you struggle with simple sentences. Both days are part of the same journey.
One of the biggest mistakes learners make is thinking that slow progress means failure. But slow progress is still progress. Every word you learn, every conversation you try, leaves a trace in your mind.
I remember feeling disappointed when I compared my English today with my expectations. But when I compared it with my English 1 year ago, I saw a huge difference. Perspective changes everything.
And sometimes, progress shows up suddenly. After weeks of feeling stuck, you suddenly speak more easily without knowing why.
That moment feels magical, but it only happens because of all the effort before it. There was a period when I thought about quitting. I felt tired of trying, tired of making mistakes, and tired of feeling behind others. But instead of quitting, I decided to change my expectations. I stopped asking myself, why am I not fluent yet? And started asking, am I communicating better than before? That small change kept me going.
For me, motivation returned when I stopped treating English as a goal and started treating it as part of my life, not something I needed to finish, but something I lived with. When English became a tool instead of a test, learning felt lighter.
Enjoyment is often ignored in language learning. If every conversation feels like pressure, it becomes very hard to continue.
Finding joy in small successes makes a big difference. Understanding a joke, expressing a feeling, or surviving a conversation are all wins.
When you notice these moments, motivation grows naturally.
Many learners are too hard on themselves. They think they are not doing enough, not practicing enough, not improving fast enough.
But if you are listening to this podcast, thinking about your English, and trying to speak, you are already doing a lot. Learning a language takes time, and that time is not wasted.
If there is one message we want you to remember, it is this: you are not alone in this journey.
Everyone who speaks English today was once afraid, confused, and unsure. The difference is not talent, it is persistence.
Thank you for listening to No Shame English.
We hope this podcast helped you feel calmer, braver, and more comfortable with your English.
Remember, there is no shame in mistakes.
No shame in accents.
And no shame in learning.